Great to see you. Great to be on your program. An incredible 20 years.
Incredible 20 years it has been for us to be here in Davos. But Borge, my first question, you've pulled off quite the coup. Donald Trump will address the World Economic Forum, not in person, but virtually, literally 2 days after he takes office. How did you pull this off?
So, you know that President-elect Trump has been to Davos twice.
2018 and 2020.
Yeah, he's the only sitting U.S. president that has been to Davos twice. He really likes it here. You know, he's a businessman. He likes to also meet the global business people to hear their input and have a discussion. And for me, it's great that he, 2 days after the inauguration, is live on video link with us here in Davos with 3,000 participants. And he's not only giving a speech, but he's also then having an interaction with some key CEOs. That's what he likes. Well,
so the interaction is going to be much anticipated along with what he has to say. But what's the expectation? What are you picking up in terms of what people would like to hear from President Trump? What would be the key questions that they would like him to address, you know, beyond tariffs and so on and so forth?
So for him in the U.S., I think he won the elections on the two I's, fighting inflation and on immigration. So I think we will see very soon some steps on the immigration side. But on the inflation, it's more of a mixed thing. So he will need to also then share what is his economic policy to keep the growth going, but also making sure that inflation is not coming back.
On inflation, since you said that that is likely to be one of the big focus areas, the concern is that with the tariffs, whether it's 10, 20 or as high as 60%, which has been the threat, that could have an inflationary impact. What is the expectation that you're going with in terms of just how severe the tariffs are likely to be and the implications and the impact on that on world trade as well as U.S. inflation?
So on inflation, of course, tariffs can play a role. But we also know from Trump 1.0, his first period, now we're Trump 2.0, that he used also tariffs to negotiate. And he already had a call with President Xi Jinping of China yesterday, and they spoke and also discussed many issues and topics. So I think on the tariffs, we will also see what it really ends with. I think he's going to use it as a negotiating position, especially where he feels that the U.S. has a big trade deficit. And of course, the biggest trade deficit he has with China. He also has a trade deficit with Europe, but that is a little bit depending on how you look at it. If you also add services and you add digital trade, it's pretty much the same. And I think digital trade and services also plays a big role in the trade with India.
Well, you know, you talked about his ability to negotiate deals. I'll ask you this in the context of what we're likely to see happen as far as TikTok is concerned. At this point in time, it still faces an uncertain future. It's already gone dark in the U.S. To meet that Sunday deadline. But President Trump has said that he is likely to provide a 60 to 90-day window as a reprieve. Would that be an indication, if that were to go through, would that be an indication of his willingness to do business with China?
So many premises in that question. Let's see what will happen with TikTok. I think what President Trump has said, that he wants American owners. And until there is no American owners, I guess he will keep the policy as it is today, following the Supreme Court decision. But, you know, with President Trump, there's also very interesting then to see what will now the policies be on, for example, immigration, because there are dilemmas there too. There's another topic that is up there. You know, 7 million people work in the construction business in the U.S. 2 million of them are probably then illegal immigrants. And if you then send them back, what will happen to prices and inflation? So I think there will be trade-offs too, but I think you will see less people coming over the borders. We already see that through the Mexican border, and maybe he will come up with a policy that is clearer. You can come to the U.S., but you have to apply. If you come yourself and illegally, there is no way. That's not the path to go to the U.S.
Yes, and what will all of this, as you pointed out, the impact on the construction sector, and what will all of this mean for U.S. growth is, of course, a question to watch. But let's talk about Europe as well. And, you've got the German Chancellor here, you've got Ursula von der Leyen of the EU coming in as well, along with a whole host of other business leaders. What's the mood, what's the feeling now in terms of how 2025 is likely to shape up for Europe?
So the growth in Europe is not what it should be, that's for sure. But there's also countries that are doing much better than others. Look at Spain and Greece. Spain is today the Western economy that has the most substantial growth of all OECD countries. And also Greece is doing much better. They were kind of written off 10 years ago. Today it's the country that used to be the engine of the European growth. Germany that is in trouble. But I think also with reforms in Germany, we should never write off Germany. I think in a few years, they are an industrial engine. So they will come back, but of course, they have to see also some structural changes to revive growth.
Let's talk about Asia as well. And of course, I'll start by talking to you about China and the outlook there as far as China is concerned. The measures already taken, but the anticipation and hope of further stimulus measures from China. How do you see what's going on there?
We will know more when Vice Premier Mr. Ding speaks to the Davos community in the opening sequence after Ursula von der Leyen on Tuesday. But in addition to slowing growth, of course, China is also faced with some structural challenges. Sinking workforce, they also have a property market they have to deal with, and they have some deflation also. So there are like these three Ds for them, deflation and also then demography and then the debt piece in addition related to the property market. So in addition to stimulus that I think will come, I think they will also have to address these more structural challenges. But the retirement age is pretty low in China. So if they increase the retirement age, they can also then make up for the decrease in the workforce, and they can also have incentivize more women working. So they have their tools, and they're still expecting 4 to 5% growth this year, and that's also in our predictions.
The theme of Davos 2025 is collaboration in an intelligence age. But, we're seeing more confrontation than collaboration. And your own report that you've done with McKinsey puts a question mark on how much collaboration is likely or even possible. So where do we go from here in an era of confrontation with the hope of collaboration?
It is true that if you look at not this backdrop, but the geopolitical backdrop that we are faced with, it's the most challenging in generations. That's for sure, because you have conflicts and you have also severe competition. But what we are arguing, even in a situation where, for example, G2, US and China, or even G3, if you then include India in this, and G4 if you include EU, will be in their national interest in some areas to collaborate. So before it was a different approach, maybe like win-win approach, but today it will be based on national interest. But I do think that national interest also will lead to collaboration. For example, the bird flu that we're seeing now spreading in the US, to deal with future pandemics, we have to work together. We're in the same boat when it comes to, for example, the wildfires we're seeing now in Los Angeles. This is a common challenge for the whole humanity. Look at, for example, cybercrime. Every year we lose $2 trillion and increasing in crime from cyber. I think everyone wants to fight this, every responsible government. So in these pockets and these areas, I think we can collaborate. And then there will be areas where there will be fierce competition on technologies, on trade, on digital trade, all this. But we just have to be realpolitical about it.
Well, you talked about technology and linking that to the theme here at Davos. I mean, for artificial intelligence, for generative AI, we've of course been discussing the need for a global framework. The World Economic Forum has been working on trying to put a global framework together. But again, I ask you this, because of national interest, sovereign strategic interest, is a global framework likely, possible, doable?
I think it's not totally unlikely, but I think it's not going to be framework that then covers all these areas in a holistic way. The first collaborative initiative was between President Xi Jinping and President Biden in Peru during their meeting there, where they signed a protocol saying that AI has nothing to do with nuclear weapons. Of course, you should say that should have been a priori given,
yes,
but at least they signed it. I think hopefully we can get the consensus that there is a good idea that the humans are on top of the algorithms and not the algorithms on top of the humans. But I think to establish these traffic rules when it comes to Gen AI and later on quantum computing, that is like breaking through all the security measures we have today, is incredibly important, incredibly important. And let's hope that next time Xi Jinping and President Trump talk together, they can even include some traffic rules for AI.
Some traffic rules for AI. But, you know, speaking of global risks and the global risk report that the World Economic Forum puts out ahead of its annual meeting. Now, if I were to take a look at what the #1 risk is over the next 2 years, it's misinformation and disinformation. But over a longer period, the decade or so, it's climate-related events, weather-related events, and that continues to be a cause for worry and serious impact and implications. Which one do you feel more hopeful of being able to address collaboratively? Disinformation, misinformation, or climate and weather-related events?
They're both very challenging. If you start with climate, I think we're already seeing in reality that the cost of inaction far exceeds the cost of action. And there is action. You know, we invest $2 trillion annually in renewables and in energy. So there is a big change, but it's not going fast enough. And fossil fuels are also incredibly, still an incredible part of the energy consumption. But over time, I think we will see agreement on mitigation strategies that will not end on 1.5 degrees as we agreed in Paris, but hopefully not too far from that. On the misinformation and the social media piece, it's also very challenging. If people stopped believing everything they read in social media, it wouldn't be a problem. You have to take it with such a pinch of salt. But, you know, people were used to read newspapers where there was a strict editor making sure that everything that was there was facts. And now you have social media, and people come up to me and said, yeah, but we read on Facebook this and this. And I said, okay, what was the source? No, you know, we have to also, I think, not regulations only, but I think we just have to have a campaign that social media, interesting, it is there to stay, but take it with a very big pinch of salt what you read there.
Okay, that's your approach to dealing with social media, Borge. And we're living in an era not just of President-elect Trump, but also of Elon Musk. So what do you think that's going to do as far as the information war is concerned, the artificial intelligence race is concerned, to have Elon Musk, you know, virtually play such a big role in the White House?
So he's taking on a very important role under President Trump. He's going to be in charge of fighting red tape and making U.S. more efficient. Less money on bureaucracy, more money invested in roads, in hospitals, education, and all that. And that's a very big job. So, and I hope he will succeed in making, of course, government more efficient. But it's important that you don't lose the baby with the bathwater, though.
Yes, we'll have to see how this plays out. But, you know, it's been over 50 years of the World Economic Forum here in Davos. And, of course, you know, you took your wows, so to speak, as far as the Davos Manifesto was concerned. But as you look at the role and relevance of the World Economic Forum in an era where there is a retreat from multilateral agencies, from multilateral institutions, from globalization, what do you foresee as the future for the forum? What do you believe will be some of the challenges that you're going to have to contend with in this new world order?
I think the core of the forum is collaboration, and also between public-private. And today you have more public debt than at any time since 1945, the Second World War. So many countries are indebted, and they will need to work with the private sector to also get things through. So we are the international organization for public-private cooperation, and the World Economic Forum has also existed during the Cold War.
Yes.
And we brought people together and tried to find ways of collaborating during the Cold War. We are now entering a new kind of era where collaboration will be different than in the past. But, you know, we still have growth even in trade. We expect 3% growth in trade this year. It's not like 4, 5, 6% as it used to be in the past, but it's still a growth. And we also see that countries do adjust. So before we did more multilateral trade agreements, like every country was on board. But we're seeing now, for example, the EU and Mercosur together did a big trade deal. They're almost 30% of the global GDP. And they are then doing mega regional trade agreement. Maybe we, in the coming year, also will see an agreement between India and the EU.
Yes.
And just imagine this, you know, in a few years, India will be 20% of the annual growth. And India is such a growth engine, even if it's now slowed down a bit. Of course, there's also important for India now to continue with these reforms in this time of intelligence. And there I would say one has to invest more in education and R&D. India is under-investing in R&D compared to some other nations. They're under the global average. So I think with all the very smart English-speaking people of India, one has to even invest more in human capital.
Yes, and more investments in R&D. That point, of course, has been made. But, Borge, you know, on India, we've got of course, 6 Indian states, along with the central government, being represented here in Davos. And we've only seen the India presence go up over the last few decades here in Davos. How do you see, especially in areas like manufacturing, foreign direct investment moving to India in this context of reshoring, which has now been the buzzword here in Davos through COVID?
Yeah, and you have also this notion of friendshoring.
Yes.
And the thing is that India is seen as a friend by many countries. So this Make in India initiative, getting more manufacturing in India, I think is going to happen and is already unfolding. We know that Apple didn't produce any iPhones in India a few years ago. No, I think there's like 25% of their production or something. Take the number with a pinch of salt. But India is developing also when it comes to manufacturing. But what really works for India and also moving forward, where we do expect most growth in the decade to come, is on digital trade and on services. And these are 2 areas where India is very strong and has comparative advantages. And if it also can catch up on manufacturing, I think this can be a very good decade for India. I think it can reach 10 trillion, but it doesn't happen without the continuation of reforms and investments in what make India competitive, in roads, in competitive education, but also getting rid of unnecessary bureaucracy and red tape. The latter is also important for India.
Well, you know, one of the sort of silver linings, so to speak, at the start of 2025 has been the ceasefire agreement that's finally been inked between Israel and Hamas. And, of course, that now takes shape and is operational as of today. What's the hope, in light of what we've seen happen with Israel and Hamas? What's the hope on Ukraine? I mean, President Zelensky is going to be back here in Davos. Do you anticipate any shift, any change in how the world deals with Russia, Ukraine, the crisis and the war there in a Trump administration?
So I think it will be extremely interesting to hear if President Zelensky sends and what kind of signals he will send when he speaks here on Tuesday. But what is very a strong message is that, President Putin thought he was going to take Ukraine in a week. And now the war is still going on. And I think the only way to end this war is a peace agreement. And the peace agreement, of course, should also be based on principles in the UN Charter, the principles also that Ukraine has to support it. But I'm not excluding that in this year there might be a ceasefire agreed in Ukraine. But let's see,
what are you basing that on? What are you basing that hope on?
Because every war has to end, and is this the time where also the Russians are seeing that the cost for them economically, but also when it comes to humans, 700,000 Russians have either lost their lives or are then severely wounded in this war. And, they have now 25% of Ukraine. It's occupied by Russia. But, that's also showing that to Russia that to take Ukraine, I think for them will be very, very difficult. The Ukrainians are fighting very hard, but also the human suffering now on the Ukrainian side is, of course, immense. Children are being killed. We know that the sufferings also lead to possibly discussions in the year to come to end this war. But who knows? It's one of the more challenging things that we are faced with. We also know that when it comes to global growth, that we expect 3.3% this year. That's provided there is no further escalation of global wars and conflicts. Just imagine if Israel and Iran now starts to fight each other. So no escalation in the Middle East, no further escalation also in Ukraine is part of that. And we'll also see how Syria develops. We will have the Syrian foreign minister joining us here on Tuesday. And will they be able to have an inclusive policy and a government that will also really, so they can find a path for more inclusiveness and people even returning to Syria.
Yeah, absolutely, and then an election eventually as well. But we've got let me get your thoughts on a debate that's currently underway in India. And we had comments coming in from two leaders in India, of course, Mr. N.R. Narayana Murthy, and he believes that, look, at this point in time in India's growth and for the needs of its economy and for nation building, a 70-hour week is par for course. And we also had the chairman of infrastructure conglomerate L&T saying he believes 90 hours should be the way forward. I know that this is a debate and a discussion in Europe, and different countries have dealt with it differently. But as you look at a future, and as you look at a future where AI is expected to provide some productivity lift, what do you see as the sort of workflow balance as well as what happens to jobs going forward?
This is a good question. I don't want to get into that Indian discussion on ours, but I think we will see that a lot of what has traditionally been back offices will be replaced by AI. And then it's important to invest in upskilling and reskilling. But, historically when then productivity increases, like you produce more for less, has led also to prosperity. So, in this country, Switzerland, 95% of the population, a little bit more than 100 years ago, worked in the agriculture sector. Today, it's 3%, and they produce more food than back then. And where did all those people go? Of course, they found other jobs higher up in the value chain that could pay better salaries and all this. And this is also what I think will happen in India in the years to come. People will maybe have to adjust their jobs, maybe they have to find new jobs, but with that, hopefully, they will get better paid. They can then have better housing, they can invest more in education. That's what prosperity is about. And I think there's going to be a prosperity revolution for 1.4 billion people in India in the decade to come.
Well, we certainly hope so. Let me end by asking you, what do you hope to achieve at the end of Davos 2025? What would be some of the key objectives that you would be satisfied if you managed to get that done out of the way? And what would be the headline for Davos 2025?
I hope that media people like you can conclude that by Davos, we were able to build a little bit more trust between countries, but also that companies say that they will play a role in making the world a little bit of a better place for 7.5 billion people on our planet.
Well, we certainly hope that is the case. Borge Brende, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us here in the CNBC-TV18 studio, for your time and for giving us a glimpse into what is top of mind here, what will be the issues that global leaders will discuss through the course of the next 5 days. Appreciate your time and thanks very much for joining us. We will take a break here on CNBC-TV18, but the conversations will continue. More collaboration, less confrontation. That's the headline coming in from Borge Brende. Back in a moment with more.